special edition of Inside South Asia with me, Bhairavi Singh. We come to you from outside the Bharat Mandapam, which is the refurbished Pragati Maidan, built over 123 acres at a cost of $325 million. This building behind me is a testament to modern architectural marvel and will be hosting world leaders from the 9th to 10th of September who will be discussing issues of global importance like sustainable growth, climate change, energy security, and of course the war in Ukraine. First up on the show, the headlines. After China's President Xi Jinping and the Russian President Vladimir Putin announced they will be skipping the G20 Summit, India's Foreign Minister responds to concerns of consensus building at the event. India's Foreign Minister Jaishankar says there are several key issues to discuss, not unusual for leaders to skip the G20. The UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak hints that the FTA talks may not be on the agenda at the bilateral meet with Prime Minister Modi, while Canada announces a pause to the trade talks just ahead of the summit. The US will focus on delivering for developing countries making progress on climate and technology new funding, but will it insist on pushing for the Ukraine war to be added in the joint communique? New Delhi is under a blanket of security with anti-drone systems, Air Force jets, 130,000 security officials and the NSG commandos guarding every corner of the country's capital. The G20 is a powerful group of 19 nations and the EU that represent 85% of the global GDP and 75% of the global trade. As India is the chair of the G20, we've held over 200 meetings across 50 cities. And India wants the focus to be on climate, development, the concerns of the global south, and the debt issues of the developing world. So will India manage to bring the focus back on these issues? As the theme of this year's G20 is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means one earth, one family.
Palu kepemimpinan saya serahkan kepada India.
November 16, 2022, Indonesian President Joko Widodo hands over the G20 session hammer to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. India takes over the presidency of the G20, a group of the 20 biggest global economies. And what a year it's been with India at the helm. A human-centric vision, a collaborative approach towards innovative solutions to global problems is defined in the theme Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or One Earth, One Family, One Future. India steers the G20 agenda at a time when the world recovers from COVID-19, global economic instability, the challenges of the Russia-Ukraine war, and food and energy insecurity take center stage. Economic issues, climate change and education top the stated issues at the G20. That includes the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war, extending loans to developing nations through multilateral institutions, reshaping the international debt architecture, and examining the impact of geopolitical uncertainty on food and energy security. There's been a distinct push to expand the grouping, a big focus on it being the voice of the global south and representing the realities of the 21st century.
So our presidency should be remembered for its unique contribution to both the citizens of the world, to growth of the world, which is sustainable and inclusive, and for being the voice of the global south, because that's important, because 80% of the growth this year is going to come from global south. 2/3 of the growth in the coming 2 decades will come from emerging markets. So, when we started our presidency, the Prime Minister held a meeting of the global south. 125 leaders participated. We got the inputs. Based on that, we based our priorities. And India is the first country which has really, a Prime Minister wrote to all the leaders that we should make African Union a permanent member of G20, and that will be a major achievement.
It's been a flurry of G20-related meetings across the length and breadth of India this last year. A tourism meet in Kashmir, meetings of G20 culture ministers and development ministries in Varanasi, a G20 Digital Innovation Alliance Summit in Bengaluru, environment and climate ministers met in Chennai, agriculture ministers meet in Hyderabad. It's a long list covering just about every facet of administration, collaboration and synergy. As India aims to emerge as a prominent player on the global stage, the G20 holds up an opportunity to amplify issues plaguing the developing world. India proposes its models of governance as solutions. Therein lies the potential influence, now and for the road ahead.
Never before has the G20 summit been plagued by so many pulls and pressures as this one. The Russian President Vladimir Putin is not attending because of the Ukraine war. The Chinese President Xi Jinping is also not going to be present for obvious reasons, given the situation and relationship with India. So while the G20 presents several opportunities, there are many challenges that can play a dampener as well.
At the invitation of the Government of Republic of India, Premier of the State Council Li Qiang will attend the 18th G20 Summit.
When China made it official that President Xi Jinping would not be going to the G20 Summit. No mistaking the snub either. India's invite to Xi stands rejected just 2 weeks after he did attend the BRIC Summit in South Africa. Xi and Modi met on the sidelines there. Even as efforts to resolve the border dispute remained foremost, there are visible frictions on stands on the future of that grouping. Weeks earlier, Modi had indirectly taken on both Pakistan and China on terror at the SCO meet. The India-China military standoff on the line of actual control is mirrored by growing political tensions and strained ties. The clashes at Galwan in 2020 that marked a turning point extend to a continuing face-off over a new Chinese map that shows Indian territory as part of China. While India is a prime beneficiary of efforts by Western companies including Apple Inc. to diversify its Chinese operations. Fact is, Beijing has no real interest in a successful G20 in India.
Chinese foreign policy generally fears about isolationism among the community of nations. That includes if President Putin had communicated on August 28 that he is not attending, then flowing from the Bali meeting of 2:18, that is Russia and China against the 18 other members of the G20, then it is quite possible if President Xi visits New Delhi, then he would have been isolated. This is the worst case scenario for China's foreign policy. That would be very hard for them to swallow.
There's also the distinct shadow of the Russia-Ukraine war. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says he will block the summit's final declaration if it doesn't reflect Russia's stand on Ukraine, which again says the China-Russia combine on the one hand and the West on the other are likely to be the most important fault lines in defining the legacy of this G20.
As far as the world is concerned, there is a East-West divide, China and Russia against the United States and the West. There is also a North-South divide. The first one is as far as geopolitics is concerned, and the second, the North-South divide, is as far as the economic situation of the developed countries of the North versus the developing countries of the South. So there are these challenges that confront the G20 at the moment. I don't think at any other time before this has the G20 faced such challenges.
At least on the face of it, challenges show on the economy front too. The UK-India Free Trade Agreement seems to be in jeopardy.
Sunak hopes to bring about closer ties between the UK and India under his leadership. And he's expected to use the G20 summit to stress to Prime Minister Modi the importance of getting a comprehensive free trade agreement over the line. There had been hopes it would be signed in time for the summit, but a deal has yet to materialize.
Canada's Justin Trudeau too has announced a pause on trade talks with India. In this backdrop, a question mark has even arisen on the possibility of a joint statement.
We have, of course, seen the Russian foreign minister who will be representing his country. He has drawn some red lines, but then I think it will be in the interest of all countries that we have a clean text, the final text, so that all the decisions that are taken on the issues of development and growth, that those decisions can be implemented by the various countries, not only the G20 members who are here, but also those who are outside the negotiating rooms, like the World Bank, like the Bretton Woods institutions, and other agencies of the United Nations who are going to be present here. So to put it succinctly, I am hopeful that we will come to a consensus joint declaration.
There can be no denying the opportunities the G20 Summit in New Delhi holds for India, as a leading voice on the global stage, as the voice of the global south, as an important powerhouse that holds a strong say on the future of the global economy. But there's also no denying that in an increasingly polarized world, the challenges stare hard.
This is US President Joe Biden's first visit to India as the head of the state, and comes at the backdrop of Prime Minister Modi's visit to America in June. Both the countries have been deepening their ties over the last decade. So what are the expectations from the bilateral meet? And what are America's expectations from the G20 forum? Find out in our next report. In a major sigh of relief, the US President Joe Biden tested negative for COVID just days before the summit. There were apprehensions that he may become the third major leader to skip the summit after wife and First Lady Jill Biden tested positive for COVID. Biden arrives in New Delhi on Friday and will hold a bilateral with Prime Minister Narendra Modi just ahead of the summit.
Turn it over to the Prime Minister to say nice things about me.
Reports suggest the two sides could discuss the sale of small-end reactors, jet engines, easing visa rules, and the war in Ukraine. At the G20 Multilateral Forum, America's agenda will be capacity building for multilateral banks, including the World Bank, global challenges of energy and food security, and supply chain resilience. The US, along with other Western nations, want to keep the focus on Russia and its ongoing war in Ukraine, pushing for its inclusion in the joint communique. Biden's visit to the G20 comes as elections are slated to be held early next year, and his latest approval ratings paint a grim picture at 40.5%, while his Republican challenger for the White House, Donald Trump, is leading the polls in the GOP race, despite Trump facing 91 criminal charges across 4 cases. As of now, things don't look too well for Biden. Questions are being asked about his age. He will turn 81 this November. Amidst this, the G20 summit comes as an opportunity for Biden to show America's leadership at the world stage.
Our main focus is heading into the G20, delivering on an agenda of fundamentally reshaping and scaling up the multilateral development banks, especially the World Bank and the IMF.
I am disappointed, but I'm going to get to see it.
Just a few days ago, the US President Joe Biden expressed his disappointment over the Chinese President Xi Jinping's absence from the summit. US and China have had tense relations over the year, issues running from Taiwan to China's aggression in the South China Sea, trade wars, and its debt diplomacy in the emerging world. The White House in August asked Congress for a $3.3 billion additional fund to materially expand development and infrastructure financing through the World Bank to offer countries a credible alternative to China's coercive and unsustainable lending.
During this visit by the U.S. president, which is Biden's first since taking office, he will have a bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Topic of discussions will be nuclear and defense partnership, as well as a special tailored program for Indian students, along with regional issues important to both sides. Susan Tarfani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
Bangladesh has been invited as a guest nation at the G20. How does Bangladesh stand to benefit from the forum, and what are its expectations? Find out in our next report.
She meets Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on the 7th of September. On the 11th, French President Emmanuel Macron is all set to meet her in Dhaka. And in between, she's coming to India on the 8th to participate in the G20 meetings. We're talking about Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Just last month, Hasina visited Johannesburg in South Africa to attend the 15th BRICS Summit at the invitation of President Ramaphosa. Back in June, Bangladesh formally requested membership of the BRICS, but it didn't meet the cut.
We have come here to BRICS outreach to reaffirm our solidarity with Global South.
And now, Bangladesh is attending the G20 Summit in New Delhi. The country is participating in all meetings as the only invited guest country from South Asia. It has a seat at the high table with India's other G20 guests: Egypt, Mauritius, the Netherlands, Nigeria, Oman, Singapore, Spain, and the United Arab Emirates. So what message is Dhaka sending with its high-profile visits and agreements with different countries at such platforms?
The last 2 months has, I think, elevated Bangladesh's position in the eyes of the world with its invitation to attend the BRICS Summit in Johannesburg. And later this week, on 9th and 10th September, Sheikh Hasina, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, will be representing Bangladesh as a guest country, invited by India and the only country in South Asia to attend the G20 Summit. As far as Bangladesh is concerned, it's good news all around. So I think Bangladesh's moment is now.
Bangladesh sees its series of engagements with the group under India's presidency this year as a big honor for the country. It is also expected that the long-pending Tista water sharing issue will come up in the meeting between the prime ministers of both countries on the sidelines of the summit. Tista water is crucial for irrigation in the northern part of Bangladesh, especially during the lean period between December and April. Bangladesh has been waiting since 2011 to get a Tista water sharing treaty signed. Apart from this, a rail link between Bangladesh and India, originating from Akhora in Bangladesh to Agartala in India, is set to be virtually inaugurated during the upcoming 18th G20 Summit. The 15-kilometer-long rail route with 10 kilometers in Bangladesh and 5 kilometers in India will be a vital link. Just after the G20 summit, the French president will be visiting Dhaka. This will be the first time the head of state from France will visit Dhaka in nearly 33 years. The last French president to visit Dhaka was François Mitterrand in 1990. In another bilateral boost, Russia's Sergei Lavrov is the first foreign minister of Russia to visit Bangladesh in its history. These international bilaterals reflect that Bangladesh has become a promising economy in South Asia. G20 is a platform towards this end.
Its economy is booming. It is the second largest garment exporter in the world after China. Infrastructure is developing very greatly. And of course, it's emerged as India's largest trading partner in South Asia. I would place this as a great opportunity for Bangladesh to showcase itself, its productivity, and also to place its ever-improving CV, if you will, in front of the world when it attends the G20 high table in New Delhi.
The government has left no stone unturned as far as the beautification of the city is concerned ahead of the G20. From wall art to wall paintings, what have you, the city has been transformed over the last week. But that's not all. There's also a blanket of security cover on New Delhi ahead of the G20 summit. All the highlights in our next report.
The moment you step out of New Delhi's Indira Gandhi International Airport, you get to see this. Fountains and beautification work line the roads on either sides, ensuring a visual treat for heads of state and delegates entering the country's capital for the G20 summit. Roundabouts and roads leading up to the main venue have all been spruced up with fountains and sculptures. Underpasses and flyovers are painted with scenes from the Ramayana, famous Indian icons and personalities. A special G20 park has also been created where sculptures of animals from member nations have been created from scrap.
Here's another look at the revamped Indian capital. Close to 1,200 backlit boards, 600 trees, lighting installations and numerous illumination components for sculptures, buildings, fountains and roads have been arranged to light New Delhi up in style for the two-day summit.
Let's tell you about some monkey business in India's capital. To tackle the city's persistent monkey problem, officials are taking an unexpected approach. As a creative deterrent, life-size cutouts of langur monkeys have been strategically placed across the city, with plans to relocate them periodically to maintain their effectiveness. This unconventional tactic aims to dissuade mischievous macaques from causing unwanted commotion during the high-profile event.
And now a look at the city's beefed up security. 130,000 security personnel, including the 80,000 strong Delhi police, will be on alert through the 2 days of the summit. The Indian military has deployed anti-drone system to prevent any aerial threats. About 400 firefighters will also be on call. The Fire Service Department is embracing cutting-edge technology to fortify its mission of ensuring utmost safety of delegates at the G20 Summit.
And with that, it's a wrap on Inside South Asia special edition on G20. From the whole team, thanks for watching. Goodbye.